Shalom, everyone, and welcome to our Shabbat Shalom service. It is Shabbat. This is April 12th, 2024, and we are excited about all that we're going to study and participate in our class on tonight, Lesson 27 of 52 lessons that will get us through the first 5 books of the Bible in 1 year. So we say Shalom, welcome to our class, and we are excited about this opportunity that has been set before us. I lost my music. All right, I got it back. So I want to thank you again for joining with me. We have some music playing in the background, and we're going to let a few others join us on that for our class on tonight, and then we will begin with our shared screen and present the word before you. And so, once we don't own the rights to this music, but we use it just to get our minds ready to block out all the cares of this world and prepare ourselves for an exciting opportunity to study the scriptures. So let's listen, and then we'll get ready to begin Lesson 27 on tonight. This is our Shabbat night service. And let us begin. Let us pray, and then we'll get ready to have our class on tonight, Lesson 27, titled Tazria. Let us pray. Jehovah our Elohim, we bless you and praise you for this day. This is the day that you have made. We rejoice. We are glad in it. We thank you, Jehovah, for this opportunity to come together and on this Shabbat and study your word, studying to show ourselves approved, workmen not ashamed of our hire, rightly dividing the words of truth. We thank you and praise you for all that you do. In the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, we pray. Amen. All right, so we welcome you. We welcome the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit that will come and give us revelatory knowledge of this word as we go through this word on tonight. So let's get to our shared screen so that we can begin our study. Right. With that, we'll get to our slideshow. All right, so we're going to go through this line upon line and precept upon precept because that is how we study the word. And so this is lesson 27 of 52 lessons that'll get us through the first 5 books of the Bible in 1 year. Since this is a leap year, this lesson, which would usually be with a companion, lesson 28 called Metzora, they would be taught together, but since this is a leap year, then they are taught individually. So We are in Leviticus chapter 12, verses 1 through 13. I'm sorry, verse 1 through chapter 13, verse 59. The word is Tazria, which means conceived. And we're going to be talking about ritual impurity and ritual purity. Ritual purity is the Hebrew word tahor. It basically means that you are not allowed to go to the temple and participate in the sacrificial system because for some reason you are considered what the scriptures tell us as impure. And that is called tamei. Tamei, Tamei, means ritual impurity, and tahor, which means ritual purity. So there is this concept of being obedient to what Jehovah is explaining to us through his word. And then we will learn as we go even more information about why this situation is as it is. So we're going to get into, we talked last week about various animals and how they would make a person unclean. And in fact, a person could in fact sin by participating in eating of something that has been prohibited by the creator of the universe. And so that's what goes into the body. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about what comes out. And so as we get into this lesson of conceiving, we're talking about a constant form of renewal, which is impure or pure. And if a person is considered impure, then they will have to be what? They have to be renewed, usually in the form of a cleansing process of the body and hopefully the mind, because this is all about being impure or pure. And so as we study the lesson, we are going to get into this particular concept of being ritually impure because of something, some kind of immersion or some kind of discharge or whatever. But it is what the Creator says that during this period, you need to be kind of isolated, alone, and away from others. Not necessarily in your house, but in terms of coming to the temple itself. And so we get into the concept of being ritually impure or ritually pure. And it's basically to get a person into the frame of mind of preparing to do what? Be close to the Creator, which is the whole system of Carbonneau. It really means, we have titled the sacrificial system, it really means being close to the Creator. And usually that is a separation that comes about through some form of sin, either physical or, in fact, it can be mental sin. That can, our thoughts, thinking about wrong things and doing things of that type can bring us to a period of impurity. We're not thinking pure and positive thoughts. Everything that's coming from us is, in fact, because we have allowed what is called Yetzer Hara, or evil inclination, to take rule over our physical bodies and minds. And so the whole concept that we're going to be getting into this lesson and the next lesson is about being ritually impure or ritually pure. So with that, let's get into our slide presentation, our introduction. The Torah lesson is continuing with discussions of ritual purity and impurity. We will also focus on the skin disease of Zarat. And so these are forms of ritual impurity and ritual purity. Once again, this lesson begins the teaching about what comes out of a person and not what goes into a person, even though what we allow into our minds is also very important and can bring us to a place of being impure. In other words, we're not able to focus and generate positive understanding and positive knowledge so that we can then be in a position to get close to the Creator. We're going to start our lesson on ritual impurity with the birth of a child and what that means for a woman in terms of being ritually impure, ritually pure, which once again is tahor, or unclean, which is tameh, and it's because of a discharge after birth. And science has confirmed that during that period, a woman is in a place whereby she is in a place whereby she is ritually impure. And so the Messiah, Yeshua, said in Matthew 15:11 that he begins to talk about this same lesson that we're talking about in the book of Leviticus. What makes a person unclean is not what goes into his mouth, rather what comes out of his mouth. And that is what makes him unclean. So in teaching this lesson in Matthew chapter 15, Yeshua is using this text from the book of Leviticus to talk about something in terms of coming out or a discharge, even in terms of your mouth or saying something that is very unkind about someone else. Yeshua is teaching from Leviticus in that particular lesson in Matthew. And if you are familiar with our Torah studies, then right away this would come to mind as to what Yeshua is doing in Matthew chapter 15, beginning with verse 11. Then we're going about the need for a woman to come to the temple after 40 days and be considered ritually clean or ritually pure, because during this time her body has had an opportunity to heal. Any discharge, which would be the same as during her menstrual cycle, is usually over by that time. And so after this period of time, she will then go to the temple, present herself before the priest, and make a sacrifice of some type to validate the fact that her period of time of being impure is over. Then we'll find that the parents of the infant Yeshua took him to the temple to be presented along with his mother to the priest. And in Luke chapter 2, verses 22 through 25, it says, when the time came for their purification, according to the Torah of Moshe, they took him up to Jerusalem to present him to Jehovah. As it is written in the Torah of Jehovah, every firstborn male is to be consecrated to Jehovah, and also to offer a sacrifice of a pair of doves or 2 young pigeons as required by the Torah of Jehovah. So we see then that the parents of Yeshua are following the Torah and what it says about this firstborn male to Mary and Joseph, even though Joseph was not considered the biological father, he was still the husband of Mary, and therefore they went to announce and to present herself at the temple to perform this ritual to make certain that she has been spoken of by the priest as ritually pure. So let's get into the first concept of Tazria, which is about conception. Jehovah said to Moshe, tell the people of Israel, if a woman conceive, there's that word Tazria. So the whole concept about becoming or being pure and becoming impure and then becoming pure again. So the whole concept of, in fact, a form of renewal and restructuring of a life, then we began to get some understanding about what is going on throughout these two chapters, 12 and 13, for this lesson about Tazria, which is conception. If a woman conceives and gives birth to a boy, she will be unclean for 7 days, with the same uncleanliness as in Nida, which is her menstrual cycle, because there's the issue of blood. So during that period, she is to remain away from other. Remember, they didn't have everything that we have today, but during that period, because of her menstrual, she would then stay in the home until it was over. It goes on the 8th day. The baby's foreskin is to be circumcised. So this firstborn male would then go through circumcision on the 8th day. And once again, the 8th day is what? New beginnings. And so we see that the period of 7 days, usually during that period, the child is being fed by the mother, which also helps her in her period of having a flow from her body. It says that she is not to touch any holy thing or come into the sanctuary until the time of her purification is over. So she can't participate in this circumcision process because she is ritually unclean. And if that child had gone to the temple or to a synagogue to have this done, then she could not participate in that because she is considered ritually impure. She is to wait she is not to touch any holy thing or come into the sanctuary until the time of her perfection is over. But if she gives birth to a girl, so there's a 40-day period as well for her to be what we understand as during that period, then she has ceased to be considered impure and, in fact, now ready to come out and join society once again. And we find that many of these different practices become fragments of people's culture, because I know in the African American community, a lot of times the older women would tell a young woman that she is to wait a little over a month before she actually comes out the house and brings the child. And so we can see that this period of the 33 days after the 7 days is something that was fragmented into our culture. It goes on in verse 6, when the days of her purification are over, whether for a son or for a daughter, she is to bring a lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or dove for a sin offering to the entrance to the tent of meeting to the priest. Now, this is, of course, if she is what? Wealthy enough to have these animals. If she is not, then she can bring the pigeons which is what we read that Mary and Joseph brought to the temple. And even if too poor for that, then bring the flour. The priest will have explained to them what is going on, and they will, in fact, begin the process of taking care of this situation of being impure. He will offer it before Jehovah the priest and make atonement for her. Thus she will be purified. So she is now considered ritually pure from her discharge of blood. Such is the law for a woman who gives birth, whether to a boy or to a girl. If she can't afford a lamb, she is to take 2 doves or 2 young pigeons, the one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. The priest, the Kohen, will make atonement for her, and she will be ritually pure or clean. And I'm not sure what's, let me look and see my notes because I see. Okay, so that, I just, I remember something else, but it's probably from some other study that I'm doing. So this is the close of chapter 12, which deals with the impure or purity of a woman. And she is essentially bringing this male child that she has been blessed to conceive and being given by the Creator, Jehovah. She is now giving it back to him in the form of presenting him before the Creator and offering a coin as well for that particular situation. She's going to redeem him back or reclaim him back from the Creator because it is from the Creator that this birth has been made manifest. Now we get into chapter 13, which is a rather long chapter, but and is kind of repetitive, but we want to get into what, once again, is pure and impure. And if you become impure, how much you want to what? Become pure again so that you can participate in society and be around others because your ritual impurity can be transferred to other people. And so when you're in that condition, then the main thing that you want is to, in fact, be considered once again pure. So you're going to take every opportunity to make sure that happens. So Jehovah said to Moshe and Aaron, if someone develops on his skin a swelling, scab, or bright spot, which would develop into the disease Zarat, he is to be brought to Aaron the priest or to one of his sons who are priests. The Kohen is to examine the sore on his skin. If the hair in the sore has turned white and the sore appears to go deep into the skin, it is Zarat. And after examining him, the priest is to declare him unclean. So now we see how important it is for the priest to be well versed in this particular lesson, along with in close contact with the Creator, so that he can, in righteous judgment, judge what he is in fact seeing. So this priest is always making certain, of course, by being at the tabernacle or at the later the temple, ritually pure, so that they are in a position to be what? Close to the Creator, thereby making themselves available to what we understand is the Holy Spirit to guide him as he goes through this process of declaring someone who may be impure to, in fact, be impure or to be ritually pure. If the bright spot on his skin is white, but it does not appear to go deep into the skin, and its hair is not turned white, then the priest is to isolate him for 7 days. Once again, that 7 is the number of completion. So during this period, it is the understanding of the priest that if it's going to be zarat, then it will grow. If not, then it will not. On the 7th day, the priest is to examine him again. So he has isolated him for 7 days. And there'll be a place where that person can go who, in fact, be isolated. He is then examined again. And if the sore appears the same as before and has not spread on the skin, then the priest is to isolate him for 7 more days. Want to find out what this is. On the 7th day, he will examine him again. And if the sore has faded and hasn't spread on the skin, then the priest is to declare him clean. It is only a scab, so he is to wash his clothes and be clean. So he's going to wash his body and his clothes and be declared clean by the word of the priest. Verse 7, but if the scab spreads further on the skin after he has been examined by the priest, Kohen, and declared clean, he is to let himself be examined yet again by the Kohen. So once again, this is after the second 7-day period. The Kohen will examine him, and if he sees that the scab has spread, in other words, whatever this is, has spread on his skin, then the priest will declare him unclean. It is zarat. So we see then that in this case, this situation, whatever this is, it has spread. Now, basically, this word zarat has been translated as leprosy, but it's a little bit different because it is believed that the cause of this, and that's why he's going to the priest, could be the fact that he is speaking very unkindly about someone and should not be doing that, or is gossiping about someone. So zarat, or leprosy, being a skin condition, is a little bit different than zarat. If a person, verse 9, if a person has zarat, he is to be brought to the priest. The priest will examine him. And if he sees that there is a white swelling in the skin, which has turned the hair white, and inflamed flesh in the swelling, then it is chronic zarat. So now this is spread, right? And he is unclean. So now whatever this is chronic, which means it is contagious to others and will spread. So the priest is to declare him unclean. And he is not to isolate him anymore because it is already clear that he is unclean. So now he's going to have to go outside of the community. So they're going to have to prepare a place for him outside the community because of the fact that he has an infectious disease. And then verse 12, if the zarat breaks out all over the skin, so that as far as the priest can see, the person with zarat has sores everywhere on his body, from his head to his feet, then the priest is to examine him. And if he sees that the zarat has covered his entire body, he is to pronounce the person with the sores it has all turned white. Okay, so now in this situation, all of this is spread. Now it is white. So in other words, it's going away and he is clean. But if one day inflamed flesh appears on him, he will be unclean. So now he's going through a healing process, although he has a serious case of zarat. Once again, during this time, the priest will be interacting with him, who is the only one that can interact with him. And that's good because he is trying to help him understand what has brought this condition about. and it's usually the form of negative discussion about someone else. And we'll see why we believe that is so at the end of our lesson on today in a situation that took place with Miriam and Aaron, the brother and sister of Moshe. Verse 15. The Kohen will examine the inflamed flesh and declare him unclean. The inflamed flesh is unclean. It is a rot. However, if the inflamed flesh again turns white, he is to come to the priest. The priest will examine him, and if he sees that the sores have turned white, then the Kohen is to declare clean the person with the sores. He is clean. Why? Because he is in the process of healing. So this is not something that can spread anymore. So he has been cured of this condition. Verse 18, if a person has on his skin a boil that heals in such a way that in place of the boil there's a white swelling or a reddish white-brown spot, it is to be shown to the priest. The priest is to examine it. If he sees that it appears to be more than skin deep and its hair has turned white, then the priest is to pronounce him unclean. The disease of Zarat has broken out in the boil. But if the priest, the Kohen, looks at it and doesn't see any white hairs in it, and it isn't more than skin deep, but appears faded, this might be a person that has been burned. And that's easy, working around fires and pots and all kinds of things. So that could take place. So then the priest will declare him clean. Then, if he doesn't see any white hairs in it, then he's going to what? He's going to isolate him for 7 days. If it spreads on the skin, the priest is to declare him unclean. It is the disease. But if the bright spot stays where it was and has not spread, it is the scar of the boil. Okay, so now we see that something has caused a boil to take place or some type of burn. And the priest is to declare him clean. Or if someone has on his skin a burn caused by fire, and the inflamed flesh where it was burned has become a bright spot, reddish white or white, then the Kohen is to examine it. And if he sees that the hair in the bright spot has turned white and that it appears to be deeper than the skin around it, it is a rot. It has broken out in the burn, and the priest is to declare him unclean. It is a sore from Zarat. But if the priest examines it and sees no white hair in the bright spot, and it is no lower than the skin around it, but looks faded, then the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest is to examine him. If it has spread on the skin, then the priest is to declare him unclean or ritually impure. It is a sore from Zarat. So this is contagious and must be dealt with in the manner of something that is contagious. Once again, isolating him, and that person will then be in communication with the priest, and the priest is examining, and of course, going back and forth in prayer to find out what has caused this Zarat to form. But if the bright spot stays where it was and has not spread on the skin, but appears faded, it is a swelling due to the burn, and the priest is to declare him clean, because it is only a scar from the burn. Verse 29, if a man or woman has a sore on the head, or a man in his beard, then the priest is to examine the sore. If he sees that it appears to be deeper than the skin around it, with yellow, thin hair in it, then the priest is to declare him unclean. So this is a contagious infection, and the priest is to declare him ritually impure. It may, in fact, spread. It is a crusted area of Zarat on the head or the beard. If the priest examines the disease-crusted area and sees that it appears not to be deeper than the skin, he's looking at it and he's checking it around it and with any black hair in it, then the priest is to isolate for 7 days. So this is what happens every time the priest is checking something and wants to bring that person before him again, then that person goes into isolation for a period of 7 days. On the seventh day, he will examine it. If he see if it hasn't spread and there's no yellow hair in it, that the crust area is not deeper than the skin around it, then the person is to be shaved, except for the crusted area itself. And the priest is to isolate him for 7 more days because it could be something that is causing an infection, could be an ingrown hair or something like that. So it may not, in fact, be Zarat. So he's going to put him in isolation and come back at a different time. If he sees that it has not spread and does not appear to be deeper than the skin around it, then the priest is to declare him clean. He has to wash his clothes and be clean. So he's going to take a ritual bath and have his clothes cleaned. But if the crusted area spreads after his purification, the priest is to examine him again. And if he sees that the crusted area has spread on the skin, the priest is to not look for yellow hair. He is unclean. So if it looked like this was healing, but it begins to spread, the priest has declared him unclean, clean, but in fact, it begins to spread. If it doesn't change and black hair grows up in it, then the crusted area is healed. He is clean, and the priest is to declare him clean. So you can see how important it is for the priest to really be in close contact with his spiritual side so that he can adequately deal with something that is so serious among a member of the community. If a man or woman has bright spots on his skin, bright white spots, then the priest is to examine them. If he sees that the bright spots on the skin are dull white, it is only a rash that has broken out on the skin. He is clean. If a man's hair has fallen from his scalp, it all, but he's so some people are going to bald, we would say, going to become bald and hair stopped growing, which is what happened to me. Now, this has nothing to do with Zarat, but it's just saying that at this particular time in history, most people did not necessarily become bald. They could shave their hair, but the condition of being bald at an earlier age usually didn't take place. But if he did get a bald spot or something like that, uh, he is still clean. But if on the bald spot or scalp where there's a reddish white sore, it is a rot breaking out on his bald scalp or his forehead. So another condition where a priest has to be ready and willing to look at this condition and then make a judgment. The priest is to examine him. If he sees that there is a reddish white swelling on his bald scalp or forehead, appearing like zarat on the rest of the body, he is a person with zarat. He is unclean. The priest must declare him unclean. The sore on his head, the sore is on his head and it is zarat. So now he's going to have to go into isolation until the priest makes a better or another judgment. Everyone who has zarat sores is to wear torn clothes and unbound hair, cover his upper lip, and cry, unclean, unclean. So this is a person who has been declared unclean, ritually impure. He has zarat. Then he is not, he's going to be wear clothing that would remind people that may see this person at some time that they have zarat, and that person would declare themselves unclean, unclean. As long as he has sores, he will be unclean. Since he is unclean, he must live in isolation. He must live outside the camp. So this person will live outside the camp in a shelter that is provided for him. Verse 47, when zarat affects an article of clothing. So now this is some kind of a mold of some type that can infect even clothing. especially wool or linen garment. Then if the stain on the garment, hide, threads, woven in parts, or leather item is greenish or reddish, it is an infection of Zarat and is to be shown to the priest. The priest is to examine the stain and isolate the article that is infection for 7 days. So once again, we see that this period of isolation is necessary for this material because it can be Zarat and can be infectious. On the 7th day, he will examine the stain. If the stain is spread on the garment, threads, woven in parts, or leather, whatever its use, the infection is contagious or rot, the garment is unclean. He then will burn that garment. Whatever that garment is, it's going to be burned. And if it's leather, whatever it is going to be burned up completely because it is a form of Zarat and it is contagious. But if when the Kohen, excuse me, if the priest examines it, he sees that the infection is not spread on the garment or in the threads, woven in the parts or in the leather, then the priest is to order that the article having the infection be washed and isolated for 7 more days. The priest is to examine it after the stain has been washed and he sees that the stain has not changed color. Then, even though the stain has not spread, it is unclean. You ought to burn it up completely. It is rotten. No matter whether the spot is on the outside or the inside, one or other side of a leather skin. If the priest examines it and sees that the stain is faded after being washed, then he is to tear the stain out of the garment or cut that particular piece of the garment out, and then a patch or something else can be put in its place. This, verse 59, this is the law concerning infections of Zarat in a garment of wool or linen, or in the threads or in the woven parts of any leather item. Remember, the leather items many times were sewn together to, in fact, make a big covering. So if they found that in the thread, some kind of way, some kind of mold or something had gotten in there, then they would what? They would clean it. If it stayed there, it didn't go away, then they burn the item up completely. But if that went away, they can then discard that part of the leather garment that was, in fact, infected, but not to the degree to where it could not be taken care of. And so with that, that concludes our lesson of chapter 13, but I wanted to go into something that took place in Numbers chapter 12, where it says that it is believed someone ill spoken of. And so that's why the priest is in fact going to be interfacing with the person to try to decide what is it that's causing this situation for that person. And so we'll study what happened in Numbers chapter 12. Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses. So they were talking negatively concerning Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian, or this Midian was an Ethiopian. So they said, has Jehovah indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? So they're gossiping about Moses. And Jehovah heard. In other words, Jehovah wants to silence this situation right away so it doesn't what? Become a form of Yetzer Hara, or the evil inclination taking over, and this gossip spreads. And on social media, we see so much of that today about negative comments about others. Now, the man Moses was very humble, more than all men who were on the face of the earth. Suddenly, Jehovah said to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, come out, you three, to the tabernacle of meeting. So the three came out. Then Jehovah came down in a pillar of cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle and called Aaron and Miriam. And they both went forward. Then he said, hear now my word. If there is a prophet among you, I, Jehovah, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak to him in dreams. So this is where we get the understanding that prophets have been given what? Visions and dreams concerning what they are to profess. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. I speak with him face to face, even plainly, and not in dark sayings. And he sees the form of Jehovah. So this bright light in the form of Jehovah, Moses sees it consistently when he goes into the tent of meeting to confer with Jehovah. And so Jehovah is bringing to their attention that this is different than what they are experiencing as prophets, speaking the words because Jehovah has spoken to them as well. And he's saying, this is how I speak to you, but with Moses, it's different. So you do not speak negatively about him. So verse 9, the anger of Jehovah was aroused against them. He departed. And when the cloud departed from above the tabernacle, suddenly Miriam became leprous as white as snow. Then Aaron turned toward Miriam, and there she was a leper. So this is a translation of what was considered Zarat, but in translating it back to English, we get leprous once again. So Aaron said he saw a what? He saw something on Miriam that he is a priest. He saw something on Miriam, and therefore he speaks to Moses concerning what he saw. He says, oh, my Lord, please do not lay this sin on us, in which we have done foolishly and in which we have sinned. Please do not let her be as one dead, whose flesh is half consumed when he comes out of his mother's womb. So he's basically saying to Moshe, she has Zarat, and please do not hold that against her so that her flesh will be totally consumed by this Zarat and she can't be healed. So then Moshe will go and pray for healing. And he prays for healing, and Jehovah says, separate her for a period of time from everyone else because of what Miriam has done by beginning to speak negatively about Moshe. We see then in the New Testament of the Brit Hadasha in the book of James, chapter 3, verses 1 through 7, it says, my brother, James says, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that you will receive a stricter judgment. So if you can't handle this position, then you should not aspire for it. Why? He said, for we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle the whole body. So there are ways in which we will all be partakers of sin. But he goes on to now talk about the mouth. He said, indeed, we put bits in horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. Look also at ships. Though they are so large and are driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder whenever the pilot desires. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So it can be positive or negative, right? The tongue is also said among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature. And it is set on fire by. So anyway, the evil inclination, this Yetzer Hara, comes. then we began to not only think on it, but we act on it when we speak. And so James is saying the very same thing that we're just studying right here in Leviticus, the very same thing that Aaron realized had taken place back in the book of Numbers. So we see then that this situation is very serious and is talked about by what took place, saying that it could be the root of it is your evil inclination has taken over, which is you are speaking so negatively about someone else. You're not trying to help them. You are basically belittling them, and this will spread like a fire. So that negative gossip can spread like fire. And so this is what Moshe is talking about when he says, when he was told by Aaron to, in fact, pray for Miriam so that this does not spread any further. And this brings us to the understanding that something spiritual has been consumed by something negative. The flesh is being consumed by negative thoughts, and these negative thoughts will spread and action will come forth. And that speaking of that is the action that comes forth from Yetzer Hara, which is the evil inclination. So with that, that kind of sets in motion an understanding of why Zarat is a little bit different than what is the disease leprosy. It's a little bit different than that in terms of its origin and its spreading. So, and the ability to form a cure, of course, is done through the priest giving good counsel to the person who has been involved in this negative form of behavior. So with that, that concludes our lesson for tonight. I want to get out of our shared screen into our full screen, and we will pray the prayer, the priestly prayer. May Jehovah bless you and keep you. May Jehovah make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May Jehovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. With that, I want to say shalom. I will see you Wednesday night for our Wednesday night Bible study. Shalom, everyone.